Now, for a video I have delayed far too long, the official release of the Gear Raid 3 drop data. We did a big study nearly 2 months ago now, tracking nearly 200,000 runs. That is not 200,000 stamina, 200,000 individual runs in Gear Raid 3 across stages 18 to 21, though most of our data, as you'll see, is from stage 21, trying to find out what are the exact drop rates on all these unique things. I think this data is more important now than ever because within the next 2 months, maybe even a lot sooner than that, could be just weeks from now, we are getting stages 22, 23, and 24. So we really need to have develop a good baseline to know what the drop rates are currently now on the top stages in Gear Raids 1, 2, and 3 so we can compare when the new stuff comes out. You heard I said Gear Raids 1, 2, and 3. We have absolutely no reason to suspect the drop rates differ for individual items that are consistent Gear Raid to Gear Raid from Gear Raid to Gear Raid. So the drop rate of Ancients in Gear Raid 3 almost certainly is going to be equivalent to the drop rate for Ancients in Gear Raid 2 or Gear Raid 1 for the corresponding stage. We chose Gear Raid 3 as the study focus because it's the most popular Gear Raid to farm, because this is where you get your best DPS gear. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Fastidious.
Fastidious.
The study, we tracked drops for everything, not just gear, not just your chance to get ancient gear. We wanted to know everything. What were your chances per run to get the enhancement spirits for ascending your gear? How about bullions to eventually ascend your gear as well? What about the different sets that are available? As you go to higher stages, does your chance to get tier 2 gear improve versus getting the less desirable tier 1? What about demon soldiers? Are there discrepancies among the rates with different demon soldiers? And how much harder is it? So are some epic demon soldiers rarer than others? What are your chances? How about the rares? And then, of course, what are your chances to get the legendaries? So in this case, the Knight of Destruction, the KOD. What about getting the pieces of an ancient summoning crystal, the shards, the fragments? What are those drop chances? Do those improve? Very importantly, what about getting your forge materials to get the even more desirable for certain things tier 3 gear? Does that improve as you go? And finally, a very weird development in the study, what about getting master keys? By the way, I've never used a master key on my account. Admire the stockpile. And I'm not going to until I have a good reason to, and I've not been given one yet. So let's reveal the data. If you want to sift through this yourself, which I do suggest you do, watch the video because you're going to want some of my insight, or at least my explanation for how to proceed through it. But I do recommend you go through it yourself after, because I'm not going to talk about every single cell on our spreadsheets because there is a lot to go through. You notice I say our spreadsheets. A huge thank you to Seamus for helping me lead this entire project and then organizing, structuring, synthesizing all the data. And then also a thank you to Maku, who created our little loot table that you're going to see, which is a really clean representation of this. Finally, thank you to R-Type, who's editing this video. Thank you, R-Type. But yeah, biggest thank you, not that it's a competition, but to Seamus, because Seamus, we went back and forth so many times over the months. You can see this is all our data. I consolidated it by making a copy, which I will share with you. You can see Seamus put a lot of work into organizing this. Here you go. These are just the raw values of the key things. So we have something called tidy numbers. This is like the final result that Seamus cleaned up. Then we have that hyper focus just for Gear Raid 321. So you know what are the chances in any Gear Raid for stage 21. And then finally we have that nice loot table that we discussed. Without further ado, let me take you through it. We had so many individual responses. It was over 2,000 people logging hundreds and hundreds of runs at a time. In the end, we had 179,546 runs accounted for. 147,000 were from 21. Then 20 was about 6,500. Actually, interestingly, number 2, second place for most runs accounted for was 19. I guess it makes sense. You get to 19, you farm that. And usually when you make that push, a lot of people go straight from 19 to 21, or you're not going to want to farm too much at 20 if you think you're close to 21. There you go, about 23,000 runs on 19, and then a very small sample from 18. A lot of the data we're going to focus on, obviously, is this huge sample from Gear Raid 321. So you can see the percentages here. 82% of the runs we covered were stage 21, nearly 13% were 19, then about 3.5% were 20, and about 1.5% were 18. The number of unique, this is gear drops, unique gear drops that we accounted for As you'll see, over 200,000 pieces of gear. I'm not misspeaking. 200,000 pieces of gear we accounted for from Gear Aid 321, and then about 30,000 from 19, about 8,000 from 20, and about 3,500 from 18. You can see the number of ancients here. And finally, the first big piece of data, what is the drop chance? So this is the drop chance per piece, not the drop chance per run. Why is that an important distinction that I'm making? Because very often you'll have runs that drop 2 or even 3 pieces. Even if you're totally free to play and you're playing at a time where they did not gift you a Priv card, even without Priv card, about 30% of the time you have the chance for an extra drop. Obviously, with the Priv card, you have even an additional chance. So even though it's less than a 1% chance, so every 100 pieces of gear, you'll have less than one of those being ancient, because you're getting multiple drops per run, it's actually over 1% from stage 21, as you're going to see that you will get an ancient, because you're getting over a large sample, more than 1 drop per run. That's how it averages out. So we're at 0.87% to drop an ancient from a single piece of gear at stage 21. At 20, it's about 0.75%, so 0.76%. At 19, it's 0.62%. And at 18, it is 0.53%. So this is pretty significant. And you'll see as it manifests more and more throughout the data, you do have a significantly increased chance to get ancients based on being on a higher stage. If we go to Bullions now, you can see the drop chance is very, very consistent, and that really surprised me. You obviously can't get them from stage 18, but we're right around that 0.35 to 0.42, I guess, range on the Bullions. They did not seem to be dropping much, and this is one of the big surprises of the study for me. Not that many Bullions dropped. You know, it's far less Bullions that you get compared to the ancients of the corresponding stage, so it's not as reliable a sample, but it is an enormous amount of runs we covered. So it is realistic, I think, that the drop chance very likely is 0.4%, and it does not change per stage, which very much surprised me. Let's go on to our different gear sets. Right, so from Gear Aid 3, there are 6 different sets that can drop. We have our 2 Tier 2 sets. These are what people are hunting for more than anything, Infernal Roar and Soulbound Arcana. And then we have our 4 Tier 1 sets. These are definitely the less exciting. Fracture, the worst of the bunch, right, because you can't even ascend that. Asclepius through Wisdom, at least you can certainly ascend. How do the drop rates vary on different stages? Well, you can see from 18 to 21, clearly, especially once you get to 21, the chance to get the Tier 2 sets is increasing. Obviously, you can't get them from 18, but at 19, you're at a 17.5% chance for Infernal Roar, 15% for Soulbound Arcana. Obviously, our sample size for 19 was smaller, but you can suspect it's somewhere between 16% and 17% or 15.5%, 17.5%, and it does go up markedly in both. And interestingly enough, Infernal Roar is more common than Soulbound Arcana. Soulbound Arcana generally is the better set for certain things in this game, not for every character, but it's interesting to see that the rate was lower, and clearly it is lower. I mean, we're talking 2.37% over so many Gear Aid 21 runs if you look at these numbers. But without a doubt, you do get more Tier 2 gear by farming the higher stages. If you look now, you get less of the Tier 1 gear, with a big exception randomly here being Insight. The chance to get Insight seems to be higher from stage 21 than 19. It would make sense if the chance to get both Insight and Wisdom was higher, right? Because that's what you ascend up, but actually no. And funny enough too, Fracture stayed very steady. With 20, we kind of have to ignore because it's not the biggest sample of all time, and with these sets, it's kind of hard to get the exact perfect number, but we can very reliably look at this 21 data because it is so many runs and it is so many pieces of gear, and we're talking over 200,000 gear drops. But definitely you get less Asclepius, and definitely the Fracture seems to be very, very similar. Like very similar. We're talking 0.12% of a difference between 19 and 21. But in general, the way it all manifested, the chance to get the Tier 2 gear, big picture, did go up. Master Keys, this was crazy. It seems it doesn't depend on the number of runs how many Master Keys you get. From everything I could see, if anyone has anything to refute this, let me know. It seems that the most Master Keys you can get as drops in one session is 1. So there's always a chance you don't get any, but you could get 1 in 100 or you could get 1 in 500. But I hadn't seen any examples where people were getting multiple Master Keys in one session. So one set of auto battles they set up. But in general, it does seem, if you're doing less auto battles, you keep having that chance over and over, there is a significantly increased chance to get them from 19 than from 21 compared to 19. I mean, we're talking like 1.5 times more likely and then some. So definitely getting more master keys, but I found that they were dropping just like per grouping, like, and they were maxing out at 1. So they did that kind of is a piece of information that points towards maybe only farm 100 at a time or 150 at a time as opposed to the full 500, which is the maximum for auto battles. Finally, this data is kind of hard to take in. This is just the raw numbers for, we'll clean this up later, so you'll see it here, but we'll really focus on the loot table for this. These are your Demon Soldier drops. You can see we counted for, even the legendary Demon Soldier, over 1,500 we counted from stage 21. So just a ton of data. You can scroll through this yourself. We'll go through it on the loot table. You do see we have the overall chance to drop a Demon Soldier. It noticeably does increase from stage 18 all the way up to 21. Just steadily, the chance is increasing. These are the chances to get each one. Like I said, we'll discuss that in the loot table. And then finally, we've got our chance per run to drop one piece of each of the forge materials. With the fabric, this seemed to be clearly increasing, though with the scales, not so much. So it's actually hard to say. The numbers look really tiny because these don't drop in individual pieces, but I just wanted to know, per run, what could you expect per run? So they come out to these little fractions. For all the data here, the fabrics, the scales, and then the chance to drop diamonds, stamina, and then pieces of ancient summons, they all are in these tiny values. You can do the quick math. Me and Seamus wrote this out over here. So you can see here, to get the number of runs you must do to get enough of a specific resource, divide the relevant number, these numbers over here, by the units to get the estimated number of runs you need to complete. So what do I mean by units? Well, for example, 30 ancient shards, so 30 pieces of an ancient, right? That equals one ancient summon. Moreover, 20 fabric or 20 scales, that will equal enough for one forge and getting one piece of gear. So for example, you can see the math here, divide 30 by 0.007, right? So on average, to get a full ancient summon from just farming gear at 321, typically it will take over 4,000 runs. If you want to know what about, I want to do one craft of left side forge gear, so you need 20 pieces to do the one forge, and then you divide it by the relevant number. You can do that here. So typically you get 20 pieces or enough for one forge every 101 runs. So a little bit more reasonable, but also kind of really rough out there getting those pieces. All right, here are the tidied up numbers. I'm not going to take you through this because we kind of covered a lot of it, but it is important to go through and learn a thing or two if you really want the specifics, which I encourage you guys to do. But a key thing here that changes from the other sheet is everything else here we just compiled Priv card versus no Priv card, which does lead to some discrepancies in the data. But because 21 is the thing that's most important, people care the most about, we made a very clear delineation here between Priv card and no Priv card. And you can see some big changes. So obviously the drop chance per piece for ancients is not changed, right? The chance to get an ancient is the chance to get an ancient, but the chance per run is drastic, right? Because you're getting more drops per run. So you have a 1.3% chance every run with the Priv card to get an ancient, and just basically a 1% chance with no Priv card to get an ancient. So over 1,000 runs, or let's do it this way, over 2,000 runs, you're looking at 5 more ancients from the Priv card than no Priv card. Over 1,000 runs, it's 2.5. So if you want that whole number, every 2,000 runs, which you will do over time, right? You would have gotten typically 5 more ancients if you had the Priv card. And this is a lot. Over an ancient per 100 runs, I think is a pretty solid metric. You can see here, this is just the typical average chance for extra gear. I think before I said with no Priv card, it's a 30%. That is wrong, my mistake. It is 20%, and then you get an additional 30% with the Priv card. And these are separate instances, so you can hit on both. So you can, if you have Priv card, you can get the typical extra bonus drop and the Priv card drop, so it's 3 drops total. We break this down for everything. You can see it basically just, you have increased chances because you get more drops with the Priv card. Very good data in here. Check it out. Finally, thank you to Maku for creating this loot table. I think this makes things really, really clear. So here's stage 18 through 21. It takes you through everything. So your ancient drop chance goes all the way from 0.53% up to 0.87% as you go from 18 to 21. Here's your Demon Soldier chance. That is clearly rising. Stamina rebate from 19 through 21 is pretty dang consistent, right about 0.7 per run. So paying back, what is that, 5% per run, something like that. Master keys pretty steadily increasing as the stage goes up. Diamonds also very clearly increasing. Here are your spirits for ascending your gear. Chance for that's going up in a pretty big way. You'll see when with 22, 23, and 24, the chances for the spirits absolutely skyrockets. Here's your ancient shards. You can go through it all and all and all. We kind of covered all this. I just want to focus on the demon soldiers. This was something I anecdotally knew headed in, but it was great to see this clear as day. Without a doubt, even among a singular rarity class, so when I say rarity class, I mean the rare demon soldiers. Another rarity class would be the epic demon soldiers. There are buckets. So just like we always had that with summoning, now they flattened that. We'll have to see, did they also flatten the demon soldier buckets? I doubt they did, because something like a Ghoulhound is 4 times more likely than the super rare Oddog's Follower. So Oddog's Follower, kind of cool, not that important. But if you think of Gear Aid 1 and Gear Aid 2, anecdotally, we do know there are super rare ones, and those are super important, right? So if we look at Gear Aid 1, it's clear as day, Necromancer is ultra rare. That is getting that Adog's rate. That is the corresponding demon soldier, and it is so much harder to get. So you're going to load up on the common one, which anecdotally is the Scourge, and it will be 4 times harder to get the rare one. So the corresponding there, the common one is Ghoulhound, then we have the normal runs, all about 5.5%. That's Soulbone Archer through Stitched Carrion, and then finally the ultra rare is the Adog's Followers. So we see that across every gear raid. Anyone that's done a lot of demon soldier farming, it's clear as day. It really is that there are buckets to this thing. Another good example, we go to Gear Raid 2, and you'll see these demon soldiers. Sorry, this is really just for GVG kind of stuff. But the Scalekin Shaman is very common. You get a ton of this. Whereas the Pharaoh is super rare, and then the Shadowcaster is extremely rare. So that's that tiny bucket one. It'd be interesting to do this study and see if there's a discrepancy between the Lightning Guards and the Fool, but I would guess, from what I've seen anecdotally, the Lightning Guard is more common than the Fool. So this is something we saw across so much data clearly get represented. So this is, by the way, this is if you drop a rare demon soldier, what are the chances it will be this one versus this one versus this one? A key thing that kind of threw me off, I didn't see coming, is even with our rare demon soldiers, there were buckets. So we have the Scalekin Mage, the Carrion Hound, and the Fallen Reaper, and the Fallen Reaper was less than half as likely to drop as the Carrion Hound or the Scalekin Mage. So very, very interesting data there. I think I've taken you through this as completely as I can. Like I said, a link to exactly that sheet is available, and we'll do a brand new study once stage 22, 23, and 24 come out. That study might be really hard though, because stage 24 will not be completed by nearly anyone. Maybe just a couple select few people with amazing, amazing accounts, at least as it stands now. Who knows, maybe it's nerfed before global launch, but as it stands now, no one has beaten 124 or 324 on Forerunner server, and at the time of filming this, only one person has beaten 224. So likely that study will be just focused on stage 22, because that's the highest I think most people will achieve. 23 is already incredibly hard. Frankly, 22 is already very hard, but that'll be really fun. I hope this data was worth the wait. I hope it helps you guys. And like I said, if you really want the cleanest numbers, lean into the tidy numbers for 21 only. You can see this sheet in the middle here, because this has the breakup between Priv card and non-Priv card, and that is important. Thank you guys. I appreciate the patience. If you're not yet subscribed to the channel, please do. I've been Fastidious. Share with your mother, and I'll see you real soon. Bye.
Fastidious.